Today I'm going to be showing you how to shade a sphere, starting with just a basic circle shape. In order to do this well, I'm going to use the chiaroscuro method, which is shading from dark to light, where your light is coming from a specific light source. For my image, I'm going to use this area for my light source, only because over here it comes off darker, and up in this corner it's much lighter. So that tells me that my light is coming from this direction. Every time you draw an object, your light source may change, or it may be from the same direction. If you were to draw a still life arrangement, you will most likely have one single light source. If you were drawing multiple objects just for practice, you might want to try drawing them from maybe the top right, directly above, the top left, straight from the left, bottom left, directly the bottom, bottom right, and the direct right. So you will want to try experimenting with your light source all the way around. Keep in mind, whenever there's a light, there's also shadow. The example that I often share in class is that if my light source is hitting my object, we'll use me as the object, the sun hits me, then I will see my shadow casted on the ground. Okay? So that will be our example or our analogy to helping us remember that where there is a light, there is also going to be shadow. So to make sure I draw my sphere very nice, I have to find a way to, there we go. I'm just going to trace the inside of my tape. I've got my circle. Super easy. Notice here how I've drawn extremely light. It's very easy to erase. If you draw too dark, you will not be able to erase it. So if my light source is coming from here, that means my light is probably going to hit this whole side of my sphere. Okay? So this is going to be the white box in my value scale, which we will call box 1. Okay? Back in this area though, because it is the furthest away from my light source, it is going to be the darkest value. I'm not going to start shading this whole thing in super dark. Instead, I would prefer that you outline where you predict that highlight hitting. It's not going to be in a single shape. It's going to take on a more organic form. Organic is more of this wiggly kind of adjustable line. We're not going to have a light source that makes a geometric shape on our surface. Okay? To begin, you are just going to shade, probably using your third or fourth box as your value. Now as I'm shading, I'm trying my best to kind of wrap around my sphere. So I'm working in this direction, not going up and down. If I go up and down, then my value is actually going to end up keeping my shape flat and not turning it into a three-dimensional object. So I'm keeping my value consistent all the way throughout, but I am not going to mess with my highlight. One tool that you can use for blending your values together is a tortillon, not a tortilla, but a tortillon. Tortillons are just rolled up soft paper, and they look like a pencil, but they're white paper rolls. And you can basically just rub that over top of all your values and it'll make it look really smooth. If you don't have a tortillon or you don't want to go out and buy one, then you could use a Kleenex that has a little bit of oil on it to help blend all this in, or you could simply use your finger, okay? But I kind of like the look of it being unsmooth. So once I have this whole value placed in, and I haven't really touched my highlight area, I'm now going to do another layer over top, and I'm not going to touch like this whole area, okay? Because this area is still pretty close to my light source, which means it is not going to be dark, okay? So this time I'm going to use my 5 or 6 value, press down a little bit harder on my pencil. Still being extremely careful to follow the cross contour lines of this shape. So you might be able to see now that that layer that I just put in is wrapping around my object. After you have that layer put in, go ahead and add another layer on top. This time I'm going to just stay within this confined area. I'm going to use my 7 or 8 value. So I'm slowly getting darker and darker, but I have not pressed down so hard with my pencil that I'm not able to erase all of this. Okay, so very, very slowly this shape is getting form, which is exactly what we want. Still haven't touched my highlight, haven't touched my second area here, haven't really touched this third area, but this is the area I just completed. Next step then is to go in even darker. At this point you might be at your 8, 9, or 10 value. You should be pressing a little bit harder with your pencil. But please still make it able to erase, which means when you are shading, your pencil is being used on its side, not like this, okay? If you're shading like this, it's really dark. Look what happens when I try to erase it. It doesn't go away. When I try to erase this, easy, okay? So we should be using the side of our pencils. Now as I start to make my values darker, I may notice that I need a little bit more contrast in my work, so I've made this whole edge pretty dark, but I need to have a smooth transition into the values as they get lighter and lighter toward my light source. So I'm going to revisit those areas just to give me a nice smooth transition. As you can see, this takes some time, so your circle should take you quite a while to do. If it only took you less than 5 minutes or around 5 minutes to do, you probably need to spend more time on it. I am using every single value that is in my value scale, but I'm just applying it in different areas. I'm going to softly make a transition point into our highlight. by lightening the pressure on my pencil. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, where there is light, there is also shadow. So because my light is coming from here, my shadow is going to continue that line and go that way. Okay? So when I draw my shadow, it is going to be in this shape. And when it comes to shadows, it is always your darkest value underneath the object. Okay? As you start to go out though, back onto the table or whatever surface your objects are sitting on, it is slowly going to fade out and eventually blend into that table or whatever the surface is that they're sitting on. Just like you did up here, I do recommend starting with a middle value and then slowly building in these dark areas. So if I'm following my rules, let's start with my middle value. And now I'm going to go back in and add the next layer of darkness. Now this takes practice. I don't expect you to be perfect at it, but I do expect to see a lot of practice along the way. If it's not perfect, I can send it back to you, or I can meet with you one-on-one and we can work together to get this correct. So that way when you do your project, you know how things need to be shaded. If you were working on a self-portrait, doing a couple of these shaded spheres would be helpful for you because your cheeks are actually spheres on your face. Your nose is made up of 3 spheres on your face. So you will need to know how to add value to those areas. Okay, now there's one other thing that when we are working with spheres, typically our light hits, and when it hits, it also reflects in the back. It only does that usually for a sphere. So I'm going to take my eraser and I'm going to erase just a thin slice. Doesn't need to be this bright white, but it should be either my 2 or my 3 value. And then I'm just going to go ahead and throw in my darkest layer as much as I can. And now my 2-dimensional object has become more 3-dimensional. When you have your light source, you will not see the outline of the object, so you can erase that so it's really light, or you can erase it to the point where it's not visible anymore. I'm just cleaning up my edges to make sure this looks complete. Okay, I want you to give this some practice. Try doing a variety of different shapes, not just spheres, because our world is not made up of just circles. If my light is coming from this direction, my highlight is over here and my shadow is over here. Make sure that your arrow follows all the way through, so your light hits here, your shadow is also casted in that same direction. Please take the chiaroscuro method and make sure you are building up your form layer by layer. Okay, you want to make sure you start shading with one of your middle values, and then you can go in and darken these areas. Anytime you adjust one single section, you're going to have to adjust everything else around it. So this process should take you about 15 minutes to do one really, really good shape. All right, please comment if you have questions or ask in class.